I don't want to email you this. I don't want to tweet it. I don't want to say it through a screen, because some things are too important to be compressed into pixels. Some truths don't survive filters, algorithms, or applause. If I asked you to meet me in person, it's because what I'm about to say could change the direction of your life. And deep down, you already know why. When I say real conversations create real change, I'm not talking about nostalgia or some romantic idea of the past. I'm talking about how progress actually happens. Every breakthrough that matters, every leap forward that reshapes industries, lives, or the future itself, starts when two or more people stop hiding behind distance and decide to be fully present. Face to face. No escape, no edits, no undo button. Think about it. You can send 100 messages and still avoid the truth. You can post, comment, react, and feel productive without ever being exposed. But when you sit across from another human being, something changes. Your posture changes, your breathing changes. Your excuses start to sound weak even to yourself. There's a gravity in real presence that strips away performance and forces honesty. And honesty is the raw material of transformation. Some of the most important decisions of my life didn't come from careful spreadsheets or perfectly worded plans. They came from uncomfortable conversations. Conversations where someone looked me in the eye and said, "This is bigger than you," or "If you don't do this now, you never will." Those moments didn't feel good, they felt heavy, but they carried weight because they were real. You remember them. They stay with you, they follow you home, they don't let you sleep. Real conversations have friction, and friction is what creates movement. When SpaceX was close to failing, when the money was almost gone and the pressure was crushing, there were meetings that could not be emails. You can't email urgency. You can't text belief. You can't forward courage. You have to stand in front of people who are exhausted, scared, and uncertain, and speak with clarity and conviction. You have to let them see that you're not pretending to be confident. You're choosing it. In those rooms, people didn't need motivational quotes. They needed to feel that what they were building mattered enough to risk everything for. ND, that kind of conviction only transfers in person. Beer. Screens are convenient, but convenience is not where growth lives. Convenience is where ambition slowly dies. It's where dreams get postponed politely. I'll think about it. Let's circle back, maybe later. Those phrases thrive in digital space. But when someone says, "Sit down, we need to talk," later disappears. Now takes over. That's why real conversations are dangerous, in the best possible way. They corner you. They force you to confront who you are versus who you keep saying you'll become. They expose the gap between potential and action. And once that gap is exposed, you can't unsee it. Every mentor who ever changed a life didn't do it through inspirational posts. They did it by pulling someone aside and saying the thing no one else was brave enough to say. Sometimes it was encouragement, sometimes it was brutal honesty. Often it was both at once. You're capable of more, but you're wasting time. That sentence can sting for years, but it also wakes people up, and waking up is uncomfortable. Real conversations also create accountability. When you tell yourself you're going to change, it's easy to renegotiate later. But when you tell another human being, when they hear your voice shake slightly as you commit, when they remember your words, suddenly the cost of backing out goes up. You're no longer just disappointing yourself. You're breaking a moment that mattered. That's why breakthroughs often follow a single meeting. Not because the meeting magically solves everything, but because it creates a point of no return. A psychological line you step over. Before the conversation, you could pretend. After it, you're responsible. Look at history. The most world-changing ideas weren't born in comment sections. They were born in rooms filled with tension, curiosity, and risk. Scientists arguing at chalkboards. Engineers debating through the night. Founders pitching ideas face to face, knowing rejection would sting immediately. There is something about being seen while you believe in something that strengthens belief itself. And here's the part most people miss. Real conversations don't just change plans. They change identity. When someone looks at you and treats you like the person you could become, it creates pressure to rise. When they challenge you, directly, not anonymously, not vaguely, but personally, it reshapes how you see yourself. You start asking different questions. You stop asking what's safe and start asking what's necessary. That's why I'd rather have one difficult, honest conversation than 1,000 polite exchanges. Politeness maintains comfort. Honesty creates momentum. If someone says they need to talk to you in person, it's not about control, it's about respect. It means what they're about to say is important enough to deserve your full attention, and vulnerable enough to risk being misunderstood. It means they believe the moment matters. And moments like that are rare. Most people spend their lives buffered by noise, by notifications, by endless content that keeps them stimulated but unchanged. Real conversations cut through that buffer. They slow time down. They make silence powerful again. They remind you that you're not here to consume life. You're here to participate in it. So if you ever feel the T-pull, that sense that something needs to be said face to face, don't ignore it. That instinct is ancient and intelligent. It's telling you that growth is near, but only if you're willing to be present for it, because real conversations don't just share information. They transfer courage, they ignite commitment, they create turning points. And the people who change their lives aren't the ones who wait for the perfect message. They're the ones who show up, look someone in the eye, and let the truth land, fully, finally, and without escape. When I say you're standing at a quiet turning point, I'm not talking about some dramatic moment where the sky cracks open and a voice tells you exactly what to do. Real turning points almost never look like that. They arrive quietly, so quietly that most people miss them. They look like restlessness you can't explain, like a thought that keeps returning no matter how busy you make yourself, like a sense that the life you're living is fine on the outside, but incomplete on the inside. This is the dangerous part, because nothing is obviously wrong. You're functioning, you're surviving. Maybe you're even succeeding by conventional standards. And that makes it easy to ignore the signal. But deep down, something feels unresolved. You feel it late at night when the noise finally dies down. You feel it when you imagine the future and notice your excitement is muted. That's not laziness. That's not confusion. That's awareness beginning to wake up. Every major shift in my life started this way, not with confidence, but with friction. A sense that staying the same was quietly becoming more painful than the risk of changing. When I left one path to start another, there was no applause, no certainty, just an internal pressure that wouldn't go away. And the truth is that pressure is a gift. Most people never feel it because they've numbed themselves with routine. A quiet turning point is subtle, but it's precise. It shows up when you're old and swerves stop working. The advice that used to motivate you suddenly feels hollow. The goals you chased because you were supposed to no longer satisfy you. You start asking deeper questions, not out loud but internally. Is this really it? If I keep going like this, who do I become? Those questions are not a crisis. They are an invitation. History is full of people who stood at these moments and didn't realize it until much later. The entrepreneur who almost didn't start because things were good enough. The scientist who almost stayed safe instead of asking the uncomfortable question. The creator who felt the pull to begin, but waited for permission that never came. When they look back, they don't remember the comfort. They remember the moment they almost ignored. A turning point doesn't demand immediate action. It demands honesty. It asks you to stop lying to yourself about what you already know. And what you know is this: the path you're on will keep giving you exactly what it's designed to give you, no more, no less. If you want a different future, you don't need more motivation. You need a decision. The reason this moment feels quiet is because it's internal. No one else can hear it. No one else can validate it for you. That's why it's easy to dismiss. But every meaningful transformation begins internally before it ever shows up externally. By the time change becomes obvious to others, the decision has already been made in silence. Think about the people you admire most. They didn't suddenly become bold. They became bold because they reached a point where staying the same felt like betrayal. Betrayal of their curiosity, betrayal of their ability, betrayal of the future they sensed was possible. That realization didn't shout, it whispered, but they listened. A quiet turning point is also where fear gets creative. It starts offering reasonable arguments. This isn't the right time. You should be grateful. Other people have it worse. Those thoughts sound mature, but they're often just fear wearing a suit. Fear doesn't want to stop you dramatically. It just wants to delay you indefinitely. And delay is incredibly effective. Because while you're waiting, life keeps moving. Years pass quietly. Potential doesn't disappear, it just expires. The turning point you're standing in right now is asking one simple question: are you willing to take yourself seriously? Not your image, not your excuses, your actual capacity. Because once you admit that you're capable of more, you become responsible for what you do with that truth. This is why these moments matter so much. They don't repeat endlessly. You don't get unlimited chances to feel this kind of clarity. If you ignore it, it doesn't go away, it dulls. And that dullness is far more dangerous than fear. Fear at least tells you something matters. Dullness convinces you nothing does. Some people wait for their turning point to become loud, to become painful enough to force action. A failure, a low, S, a crisis. But the strongest people don't wait for collapse. They move when the signal is still quiet, when the cost is manageable, when courage is a choice rather than a necessity. If this feels personal, it's because it is. This isn't a generic moment in time, it's your moment. Not because you're special in a sentimental way, but because your life can only be lived by you. No one else can step into your decisions. No one else can take responsibility for the years ahead. A quiet turning point doesn't demand perfection, it demands commitment. It doesn't ask you to know every step. It asks you to stop pretending you don't see the crossroads, because you do. And years from now, when you look back, you won't remember how safe you played it. You'll remember whether you listened, whether you honored that subtle pull, whether you chose growth before regret forced the decision for you. This is how lives change, not in explosions, but in moments of silent clarity. And the people who go to build, lead, and create aren't the ones who waited for certainty. They're the ones who recognized the turning point while it was still quiet and stepped forward anyway. When I say discomfort is a signal, not a warning, I'm talking about one of the most misunderstood forces in human progress. Most people are trained to run from discomfort the moment they feel it. They interpret it as danger, as a sign they're doing something wrong, as proof they should stop. But that instinct, while useful for survival, is disastrous for growth. Because every meaningful step forward feels uncomfortable before it feels right. Discomfort is not your enemy. It's your compass. Think about the first time you ever tried something that mattered. The first time you spoke up when it would have been easier to stay quiet. The first time you took responsibility instead of waiting for instructions. The first time you aimed higher than what people expected of you. Your heart raced. Your hands felt tense. Your flooded with doubts. That wasn't fear telling you to stop. That was your nervous system adjusting to expansion. Every time you outgrow an old version of yourself, it feels like friction. Growth requires leaving familiar territory, and your brain hates unfamiliar territory. It wants predictability, not potential. Safety, not significance. So when you feel discomfort, your brain sounds the alarm. But the alarm isn't saying this is wrong, it's saying this is new. When I started taking risks that didn't make sense to most people, discomfort was constant. Leaving stable paths, betting everything on ideas that sounded unrealistic, standing in rooms where failure wasn't hypothetical, it was one wrong decision away. That feeling never meant I was on the wrong path. It meant the path mattered enough to stretch me. The problem is, modern life has taught people to anesthetize discomfort instead of listening to it, scroll, distract, numb, postpone. If something feels hard, we assume it's sustainable. If something feels heavy, we assume it's unhealthy. But weight is how strength is built. Resistance is how capacity grows. No one accidentally becomes resilient. Discomfort is the price of admission for a meaningful life. Look at anyone who's built something extraordinary. They didn't feel confident first. They felt uncertain, exposed, and often alone. Confidence comes later, after repetition, after failure, after surviving moments you once thought you couldn't handle. If you wait to feel comfortable before you act, you'll wait forever. Comfort is a byproduct of growth, not a prerequisite. There's a story people don't like to tell about success. It doesn't just require talent or intelligence. It requires tolerance for discomfort. The willingness to sit in uncertainty longer than others. The ability to endure criticism without folding. The strength to keep moving when validation is absent. That's not glamorous. It's quiet. It's internal. And it's decisive. Discomfort reveals what you care about. You don't feel uncomfortable about things that don't matter. No one feels anxious about goals they don't believe in. The intensity of your discomfort often matches the importance of what's at stake. If something scares you, challenges you, or stretches you, it's usually because it's connected to a future version of yourself that demands more. That's why fear and excitement often feel similar. The body doesn't always distinguish between threat and growth. It just senses intensity. The question isn't, do I feel uncomfortable? The question is, what is this discomfort trying to teach me? Sometimes it's telling you to prepare more. Sometimes it's telling you to let go of an outdated identity. Sometimes it's telling you that you're about to do something that matters. The mistake is assuming all discomfort is danger. That assumption keeps people small. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they misinterpret signals. They feel discomfort and retreat instead of recalibrating. They assume resistance means rejection, when often it means refinement. They quit right before the breakthrough because the pressure spikes just before progress becomes visible. And here's the hard truth. The discomfort doesn't go away when you avoid it. It just transforms. Avoided discomfort turns into regret. Suppressed ambition turns into resentment. Delayed decisions turn into quiet dissatisfaction. The pain of growth is temporary. The pain of staying the same compounds. Every time you choose discomfort in the direction of your values, you expand your internal limit. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes routine. This is how strength is built, not by avoiding stress, but by adapting to it intentionally. Think about the moments that shaped you the most. They probably weren't easy. They probably weren't comfortable. But they were clarifying. They taught you who you are under pressure. They showed you what you're capable of when excuses aren't available. You didn't grow despite the discomfort. You grew because of it. And this is why discomfort is such a reliable signal. It appears right before transformation, right before you speak the truth, right before you take responsibility, right before you commit fully instead of half-heartedly. It's the threshold emotion, the feeling that marks the boundary between who you've been and who you're becoming. The people who change their lives don't eliminate discomfort. They develop a relationship with it. They learn to ask, is this discomfort moving me toward the life I want? If the answer is yes, they lean in, not recklessly, but deliberately. So if you're feeling stretched right now, uncertain, uneasy, restless, that's not a warning light. That's an indicator that you're close to something meaningful, something that requires courage instead of comfort, something that demands growth instead of permission. Discomfort isn't telling you to stop. It's asking if you're ready, and the future doesn't belong to the most comfortable people. It belongs to those who learned how to move forward while uncomfortable, and refuse to let that feeling decide their limits. When I say most people play small without realizing it, I'm not criticizing them. I'm describing a quiet pattern that repeats everywhere. It doesn't look like failure. It looks like responsibility. It looks like being realistic. It looks like waiting until things are certain. And that's why it's so dangerous. Because playing small rarely feels like giving up. It feels like being sensible. People don't wake up one day and decide to shrink their lives. They do it gradually. One safe decision at a time. One postponed risk. One moment where they choose approval over ambition. And because nothing collapses immediately, they assume everything is fine. But inside, something is slowly being negotiated away. Most people underestimate themselves not because they lack intelligence or talent, but because they confuse comfort with stability. They build lives that are predictable, manageable, and socially acceptable, then wonder why they feel restless. They mistake the absence of chaos for the presence of purpose, and purpose doesn't work that way. Playing small often begins with listening too closely to the wrong voices. Voices that say, be careful, don't aim too high. People like us don't do that. These voices rarely sound cruel. They sound concerned, practical, experienced, but they carry other people's limitations, not your own. Every industry, every innovation, every breakthrough, all was built by someone who ignored those voices long enough to find out what they were capable of, not because they were reckless, but because they were honest about their potential. And honesty, when it comes to potential, is confronting. It demands action. I've seen this pattern repeatedly, people with extraordinary ability living far below their capacity. Not because they're afraid of failure, but because they're afraid of standing out. Afraid of being judged. Afraid of being wrong in public. Playing small feels safer because it keeps expectations low. If you don't fully commit, you never fully fail. But you also never fully live. There's a subtle lie people tell themselves, I'll go all in later. Later becomes a placeholder for courage. But later is not a plan, it's an escape hatch. It allows you to feel ambitious without being accountable. And years can disappear inside that word. The truth is, most people don't need more time. They need more honesty. They need to admit that. They've been protecting their comfort at the expense of their growth. That they've been confusing patience with avoidance. That they've been waiting for permission that no one is coming to give. Playing small also shows up as over-preparation, endless learning without execution, research without risk, planning without commitment. It looks productive, but it's often fear wearing a disguise. Knowledge feels safe, action feels exposed, and exposure is where growth lives. Look closely at people who actually achieve outsized results. They don't wait until they feel ready. They move while they're still uncertain. They don't dilute their goals to make them socially acceptable. They pursue what matters even when it makes others uncomfortable. Not because they're arrogant, but because they're aligned. Alignment is powerful. When someone commits fully, something shifts. Their decisions become cleaner. Their energy becomes focused. Their progress accelerates. Playing small scatters energy. Calm. Commitment concentrates it. There's also a cost to playing small that no one talks about: resentment. Resentment toward others who take risks, toward people who speak boldly, act decisively, and seem unbothered by judgment. That resentment isn't about them, it's about the part of you that wants to do the same but hasn't been allowed to. This is why comparison hurts more when you're playing small. You're not just seeing someone else's success, you're seeing a version of yourself you didn't choose. And that realization can either wake you up or harden you. Playing small is often justified by responsibility. Family, stability, security. These are real and important. But responsibility doesn't mean abandoning ambition. It means taking responsibility for your potential, not burying it. Your capacity is not a liability, it's an obligation. History doesn't remember the people who played it safe in extraordinary times. It remembers the ones who stepped forward when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. The ones who accepted uncertainty as the price of significance. The ones who refused to negotiate their vision down to something more comfortable. And here's the uncomfortable truth. No one is coming to challenge you. No one is going to force you to play bigger. The world will happily accept the smallest version of you. It asks less and expects less. It's on you to decide whether that's enough. The moment you stop playing small isn't marked by external success, it's marked by internal commitment, a decision to stop hiding behind half measures, a refusal to keep your life reasonable at the expense of what's possible. You don't outgrow playing small by accident, you outgrow it by choosing to take yourself seriously, by acting in proportion to your potential, not your fear, by accepting that criticism is inevitable, but regret is optional. Because at the end of your life, you won't measure it by how carefully you avoided risk. You'll measure it by whether you honored what you were capable of. And the greatest tragedy isn't failure, it's realizing too late that you never fully tried. Most people play small without realizing it. The moment you realize it, you're no longer most people. When I say the future needs builders, not spectators, I'm not talking about titles or status or who gets credit. I'm talking about a mindset, a way of engaging with the world. Because right now, more people are watching history happen than shaping it. And that gap is where opportunity lives. It's never been easier to observe, to comment, to analyze, to criticize from a distance. You can watch launches, innovations, collapses, and breakthroughs in real time without ever risking anything yourself. And observation feels intelligent, it feels informed, it feels safe. But watching the future is not the same as building it. Builders feel the weight of uncertainty. Spectators feel the comfort of opinion. Every major shift in the world, technological, cultural, economic, was driven by people. They didn't wait for consensus. They didn't ask whether the timing was perfect. They didn't wait until everyone agreed. They saw a problem, felt the urgency, and stepped into the arena, not because they were fearless, but because they were committed. The builder's mindset starts with ownership. Builders don't ask who's responsible, they ask what can I do? They don't outsource agency to institutions, trends, or luck. They take responsibility for outcomes, even when those outcomes aren't guaranteed. And that's uncomfortable, because responsibility removes excuses. Spectators, on the other hand, are always one step removed. They wait for proof, they wait for validation, they wait to see who wins before choosing a side. And by the time the future is obvious, the most meaningful work is already done. Look at any breakthrough that changed the trajectory of an industry. It didn't start with mass approval, it started with a few people willing to look foolish, to fail publicly, to calm MIT resources, time, and reputation to something uncertain. Those people weren't special because they knew the future. They were special because they were willing to build toward it. Building is messy. It's inefficient. It involves false starts, broken systems, and uncomfortable learning curves. That's why most people prefer to watch. Watching gives you the illusion of participation without the cost of failure. But the illusion wears off, because deep down, humans aren't wired to only consume. We're wired to create, to contribute, to shape. The dissatisfaction many people feel today isn't because they lack information, it's because they lack agency. They know more than ever, yet feel less involved. More connected, yet less impactful. That tension doesn't resolve through more content. It resolves through action. Builders understand something fundamental. The future doesn't ask for permission. It's built by those who show up early when the outcome is still unclear, when there's no road map, when there's no applause. That's when decisions matter most, before success makes them obvious. And being a builder doesn't mean you have to start a company or invent something revolutionary. It means you stop outsourcing responsibility for the direction of your life. It means you build skills instead of just opinions, systems instead of excuses, momentum instead of commentary. Builders don't complain about what's broken. They ask how it works and how it can be improved. They don't wait to be chosen. They choose themselves. They don't wait until they're fully ready. They start, then adapt. And that willingness to move first compounds faster than talent ever could. There's also a moral dimension to building that people often ignore. The future will be shaped, whether you participate or not. Decisions will be made. Technologies will be deployed. Systems will evolve. If thoughtful, capable people choose to sit out, the vacuum doesn't stay empty. It gets filled by whoever is willing to act. Spectators like to believe neutrality is harmless. But neutrality in moments of change is still a choice. It's a choice to let others decide what the world becomes. Builders understand that responsibility doesn't disappear when you ignore it, it just shifts to someone else. History rewards builders not because they're perfect, but because they're present. They're willing to be wrong in motion rather than right in hindsight. They understand that progress is iterative, that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the process of creating anything real. The future also demands resilience. Builders get criticized, misunderstood, mocked, not because they're wrong, but because they're early. Spectators rarely face that pressure because they're insulated by distance. But distance also dulls purpose. You can't feel meaning from the sidelines. There's a moment in every era where the gap between watching and building becomes impossible to ignore, where people realize that scrolling, reacting, and waiting haven't moved them any closer to the life or the world they want. That realization can feel heavy. But it's also liberating, because it means agency is still available. The future doesn't need more commentary, it needs courage, it needs people willing to take imperfect action. People who understand that building is not about certainty, it's about commitment. Not about control, but about contribution. If you feel frustrated with where things are headed, that frustration might be an invitation to stop watching and start shaping, to trade passive awareness for active responsibility, to move from someone should to I will. Because spectators inherit the future they're given. Builders create the future they want to live in. And the defining question of this moment isn't what you think about the future, it's whether you're willing to help build it. When I say this is your moment to decide fully, I'm not talking about motivation or mood or temporary confidence. I'm talking about a line in the ground, a moment where half commitment is no longer an option, because most lives don't fail from lack of talent or opportunity. They stall from indecision, from living in between, from never fully choosing. Partial decisions feel safe. They let you keep one foot in the future and one foot in the past. You can say you're trying without being responsible for the outcome. You can stay busy without being exposed. But the cost of living that way is invisible at first and enormous over time. Because nothing meaningful grows in divided soil. Every person who has ever changed the trajectory of their life reached a moment, here thinking ended and deciding began. Not when everything was clear, but when clarity became less important than commitment. They didn't wait for certainty, they chose direction, and direction creates clarity far faster than contemplation ever will. Look closely at the people who seem decisive. They're not braver than you, they're not more confident by nature, they simply understood something earlier, that hesitation doesn't reduce risk, it extends it. The longer you delay a real decision, the more energy it drains from you. Indecision is exhausting because it keeps your mind in a constant state of negotiation. A full decision ends negotiation. When you decide fully, something clicks internally. Your energy stops leaking. Your actions align. Your excuses lose credibility. You stop asking, should I? And start asking, how do I? That shift changes everything, because problems look different when quitting is no longer an option. Most people think commitment limits freedom. The opposite is true. Commitment creates freedom by eliminating distraction. When you decide fully, you stop wasting energy on alternate versions of your life that you're not actually living. You become present, focused, dangerous in the best sense of the word. The reason this moment matters so much is because it's quiet. No one is forcing you, no deadline is looming, no crisis is demanding action. And that's exactly why it's powerful. Choosing under pressure proves survival. Choosing without pressure proves identity. Real decisions are internal before they're visible. No one sees the moment you stop negotiating with yourself. No one hears the internal sentence that changes everything, I'm doing this. But from that moment forward, your behavior shifts. You stop dabbling, you stop explaining, you start building. Think about the moments that define people you admire. Not the highlight reel, the decision point. The instant they chose to ta key responsibility for something uncertain, to risk reputation, to endure discomfort, to act without guarantee, that decision didn't make life easier. It made it meaningful. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you don't decide fully, life will decide for you. Circumstances will harden, options will narrow, time will make choices irreversible. Not because the world is cruel, but because momentum is real. Direction compounds, whether you choose it or not. There is no neutral path, only chosen paths and default ones. Full decisions also demand honesty about what you want, not what sounds impressive, not what's socially acceptable, what actually pulls you forward. And once you name that, you inherit responsibility. Responsibility to act in alignment with it, even when it costs you comfort, approval, or familiarity. This is where many people hesitate. Because deciding fully means letting go of backup identities, backup excuses, backup futures. It means you can't say, I could have been, more without confronting why you chose not to. And that level of honesty is intimidating. But it's also liberating, because once you decide fully, failure loses its power. Failure becomes information, not identity. Feedback, not judgment. You stop fearing being wrong and start fearing staying small. You'd rather adjust than retreat. You'd rather learn than protect your ego. Every meaningful achievement is built on a series of full decisions made without full information. No one ever sees the whole path at the start. They see a direction that feels necessary, and they move. The clarity comes later, earned through motion. This is why waiting to feel ready is a trap. Readiness is the reward for action, not the prerequisite. You become ready by deciding fully and letting reality shape you. Growth doesn't ask for confidence, it produces it. And make no mistake, this moment will pass. Not dramatically, quietly. You'll either step into it or step around it. Both feel normal in the moment. Only one changes your life. Years from now, you won't remember how uncertain you felt today. You'll remember whether you chose, whether you honored the pull you felt, whether you committed when it would have been easier to keep options open. Because open options feel empowering, but they dilute your power. Focus multiplies it. This is the moment where you stop flirting with the future and start building it, where you stop rehearsing and step on stage, where you stop waiting for proof and become the proof. Decide fully, not because success is guaranteed, but because regret is predictable. This isn't about pressure, it's about ownership. It's about choosing to live in alignment with your capacity instead of negotiating it down. This is your moment to decide, and once you do, everything moves.